I'd like to call Julie McCain, our president, up, and we're honored to have with us this morning Council President Joe LaCava, and I'd like, if he would come up as well, to present a proclamation.
Thanks, Mike.
Are you just gonna yell, Joe?
Yeah, I'm just gonna yell.
Sound is pretty good.
Pretty good. Realizing how dangerous it is for me to be here in Balboa Park after Monday night.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I said, no, this was more important. Anyway, I used to attend these meetings back in the day before I got elected, and it was always a great way to spend a Saturday morning. And I see a lot of familiar faces here, and it's great to reconnect, but I really wanted to honor the friends for the good work that you've done. 40 years, I mean, that's a lot in itself to be proud of, from Ms. Gill, who started this, and you keep the dialogue that I think is so important for a city like San Diego in terms of the architecture and what you like and what you don't like, looking backwards, looking forwards, both the design and everything that encompasses design. So with that, thank you for stepping up as president. I know that's a big assignment, but this is a proclamation. I'm not going to read it because nobody really wants to hear the whereases. But September 20th, 2025 has been proclaimed as Friends of San Diego Architecture 40th Anniversary Day.
Thank you very much.
I would like to say, again, thank you to Council President LaCava. We did not ask for this. His office called and said we'd like it, and I think that really says something about both the council president and perhaps about us as well.
Certainly worthwhile.
Thank you.
Again, congratulations.
Thank you.
And a little bit about, it is 40 years. Few of us remember 40 years, but not all of you, so we're going to have a little bit of background from Catherine Dow.
I'm going to add a little bit right now because I hunted Emmy Garnigat and Don Geiger. Emmy is Harriet's daughter.
Raise your hand.
And I couldn't find her, but she showed up today. I can say that it's just so gratifying to me, 40 years after my mother had this germ of an idea and got this started, that it was such a good idea that it has kept going for this long. It's great to see people that I've known since then and new people that I don't know.
Your mother was an inspiration.
Woo! 40 years ago, that's a lifetime for some of us. Many of you did not have the privilege of knowing Harriet, but I did. She was a legend, a petite woman with a charming smile, a brilliant mind, and a sense of humor. She was a walking billboard promoting Friends of San Diego architecture whenever she went, with a handful of brochures to hand out. I could repeat her many accomplishments, but you can read them on our website. I'd like to share just a few stories. Harriet always chose the speaker she invited to speak a year ahead of time. Before they would speak, she would do a telephone interview with them and use the information in her introduction of them at the meeting. The year advance notice was quite amusing to the speakers, with Ralph Rosling responding, "Well then, I have time to prepare." By the way, I only know of one person who declined the invitation in all those years. So that was remarkable. When our steering committee discussed how we could pay New School of Architecture and Design for offering a venue space free of charge all those years, Harriet replied that we repaid New School in full by promoting the school and encouraging students to attend there and become San Diego's new crop of architects and designers. End of discussion. One of the last conversations I had with Harriet before her death on August 8, 2008, was whether we should shut down FSDA when she passed away. It was one of her few suggestions we rejected. The organization had come a long way since her germ of an idea unfolded. It had a strong affiliation with New School, AIA, SDAF, and other design groups. The accessory dwelling unit competition brought attention from the public, and Harriet's book Essays was well received. Harriet's steering committee was made up of creative, talented, lay, and professional people who would carry on and expand upon her ideas. And here we are, 17 years on, still cultivating the growth of the seed she planted. What did we accomplish over the 17 years? We have turned a grassroots group into a 501c3 nonprofit in 2012. We created an architectural online image library when we received Ned Pater's 10,000 slide collection from his family after his death. It took 3 years to digitize and add to our website. We added 4,000 teaching slides to our image library from architectural historian Diane Kane. A project completed in 2024. We presented an exhibit featuring 30 San Diego women in architecture and landscape architecture in 2015 to 2017. In 2017, we began to videotape our lectures on YouTube, offering an opportunity to those who could not attend the meetings. We replaced our live meetings with Zoom meetings during the COVID years. So we were still in progress. And finally, we have returned with a live audience in a new venue, and what a wonderful venue. We have a creative board of lay people and professionals. Joe Jones is our treasurer, and the friendly face you always see when he's at the desk at the beginning of the meeting. Julie has been a leader for a few years and keeps us in line. Margie is a new member, and she has been a great help in picking up the slack when we need her. Mike Stepner and Roger Sholey plan our programs. Nate Blair handles our audio-visual needs. And Bob Brahms has developed a fantastic newsletter that is published every month and is shared with our affiliates. Now we are looking forward to the future.
Again, I want to welcome everybody to this panel discussion celebrating the 40 years and talking a little bit about the past and what it portends for the future of our region. And we have a distinguished panel today with us. Howard Blackson.
Yes.
Michael Cintron. Groth and Jerry London. I won't give you their resumes because, as Catherine mentioned, Bob Brahms puts out a newsletter, and if you haven't read that, you go home and read it, and you'll find out who they really are. But we want to start with a little bit about the past. That great urban philosopher, Yogi Berra, once said, "You don't know where you are unless you know where you've been. And you don't know where you're going unless you know where you are." And I think that's absolutely true. Even though he spent most of his time as a catcher for the New York Yankees, he said some of the most profound things that we need to think about as we continue with what we do. I want to set the stage. Discussions about how we grow, how San Diego should develop, what should happen in our region is not something that was in this morning's newspaper. It goes back almost to the days of Father Sarah. And the discussions about growth and development in San Diego is for many people a contact sport. We all get involved in it in some way. And Council President LaCava was there. I want to say I admire what the council can do, because I was up there a couple of times in the last couple of weeks and listening to the public comment. No matter what the topic is, people can find a way to take you down a conspiracy rabbit hole really quickly. And that's sort of the nature of who we are today, and that's unfortunate. But I would like to talk, I had mentioned Father Sarah, but I want to go back to 50 years. 1974 is the 50th anniversary of Temporary Paradise. Bruce Appleyard is here, his father, Donald, it asked the question, what's happening to San Diego? Is our paradise temporary, or is it something we really can manage and deal with? And it came about at a time when we were going through rapid growth, discussions about how we slow down growth, and the term was growth management and various policies that came forward. And then following that was Proposition 13, which said we no longer had any money to do anything anyway, so you're stuck with it. Let's fast forward 10 years to when Harriet started the Friends of San Diego Architecture. We were in what was called, at that time, the growth wars. We were again debating where growth should go. People would drive in on I-15 in the morning and be cows grazing alongside the highway, and they come home in the evening and it was full of houses. And they were concerned. And so we had 4 ballot measures at the time, each one putting a numerical cap on how many houses we would allow over the next umpteen years. Luckily, we voted on all 4 and defeated them, because who knows where we would be if we had that. But the 2 things that came out of it is the Friends of San Diego Architectural Foundation hired Alan Jacobs and Ian McCarr, both architects and landscape architects. And they came up with 2 things that really have sort of been a planning philosophy since then. One was preserve our natural environment. And out of that came the MSCP and other measures to preserve our canyons and hillsides. The other one, which we seldom follow, but we should, is never widen another street. You don't need to do that to move traffic. You need to go the opposite direction. Anyway, all this was when Harriet felt that we needed a forum for the community to hear about issues, the design professionals to hear what the community thought, and to really have everybody walk out of here with some new ideas how they want to approach quality of life in our community. We are very critical in San Diego many times, and I know many of the panel have participated with me in discussions about how we're doing things wrong. But this is a celebration, and I want to talk about some of the things we've done right over the years, just to set the stage. The first is where we are, Balboa Park. 1,400 acres set aside when there was about as many people in the room today as there was in the city of San Diego. And we have this beautiful park, which has been shrinking. I mean, we have work to do to preserve this place, but we haven't. Downtown San Diego. When I first came here in the Navy, it was for me. It was where the locker clubs were, and the bars, and all the other things that I participated in as a single sailor. But not anymore, and all that's gone away, and we have housing and shops, and we have all sorts of new buildings. Convention center, I was at the Rady Shell last night. Beautiful to sit there at night, listen to the music, watch the skyline, watch the boats. But it also pointed out something else, that we sometimes do things. Getting to the Rady Shell from downtown is impossible. We built a wall between downtown San Diego that blocked out visual and physical access in the waterfront. Can we correct that? How do we deal with those things? That's something I would hope the panel has the answer for.
Lots of dynamite.
The city reinvented single-room occupancy hotels, which became a model nationally for how you can house people. We have work to do on that, but we reinvented that model in a way that was safe, sanitary, and decent places for people to live. Along that line, something that Catherine didn't mention, the granny flats, big topic of discussion. It came out of a competition that we held, how many, 20 years ago now?
Yeah, 15.
And we a lot of ideas about how you can build granny flats and still preserve neighborhood character. It was taken up by other cities in California as models. We didn't. Perhaps we should have. We did not have some of the discussions today. The trolley, the first in the US to have a system like that. We saved Mission Valley from being a concrete channel. I mentioned the preserving canyon lands. So there's a lot of these things that we have done. But we also have not done a lot of things as well. We have communities that have been disinvested in for years and years. And we may never catch up. We have a shortfall of, I don't know how many $1 billion in public services facilities. These are things we have to address. My favorite line when I was at the city, I go to the council and tell them how cheap we were. And that's still true. And so we need to address some of these things, and we'd like to have a panel talk about some of these things and perhaps give us the solutions, or at least plant a lot of seeds about what we should be thinking about. And I want to start with Howard to talk about the present and his view of the future, because I know you will anyway.
Thank you, Mike. Or should I say Mr. Marley, and I'm the ghost of Christmas present. I'm glad I have the present. I think you guys have the short end of the stick, because right now we're at this plateau, at this decision point. The profession, architecture and design profession was ascending, and now it's flattened off. And we might go this way or we might go that way, but we're at this plateau right now. It's kind of rocky and shaky. It's going up and down, and we're not sure what direction. And so and that's just kind of the trajectory of growth or things. Either you go this way or you go up. And I think the reason why we're at this shaky plateau time is that our industry is in great turmoil due to the current administration's tariffs on materials, making materials extremely expensive, the terrorism on the labor market, the loss of jobs due to the job market is flat because we're building so much artificial intelligence infrastructure, warehousing, solar panels, wind farm. It doesn't take a whole lot of the data centers that you see in Imperial County. You don't have a lot of architecture or design associated with them at all, or planning. And the future outputs are there's going to be fewer jobs because AI is going to replace a lot of this. And so we're at this, what's going to happen, because everything's being invested in that market right now, which Gary knows very well. And so that's that scary moment. But there's also opportunity in that historic preservation, the way that we do historic preservation is in need of reform. We're still using the same old historic preservation, private applications one by one. And the community plans do a good job of telling everybody where the districts are, but they don't do a good job of, Joe. The community plans need to do a better job of making a historic master plan for the city, which it's there. It's just a matter of instructing city staff to come up with it. Thank you, Joe. And then the next step, Joe, is just write this down. Waiving zoning is a great start. Zoning was not a good tool, Mike, and it wasn't implementing the things that we wanted today, because it was built upon the ideas of separation, segregation, modernism, and freeways in the future of the 40s and 50s in San Diego. And right now we're waiving zoning, and they're saying, build, and we're building, hopefully building ADUs, apartments, all based on unfunded and poorly built transit. And we're losing funding on transit. MTS is pulling funds, the state's pulling funds, the feds are getting out of the game. And so if we're waiving zoning the absence of rules without a basis of really why they're there, because the transit obviously isn't there. I think we're in for a great opportunity to reform zoning, reform how we regulate building and construction of history and future in San Diego right now. We're a relatively young city. We didn't really get rich until the mid-century modern, about 1950s is when San Diego went from like 300,000 to 700,000 people, which was a doubling in population. Like 50. When did you show up with all the Navy guys? And when everybody showed up, my dad was there, everybody was there. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So that's when we got rich. So we have this mid-century modern trajectory. Chicago got rich after they burned it down, and San Francisco got rich after they burned it down, and our city never burnt. So sometimes that's helpful, but we did build differently, and so we have an opportunity right now to honor our mid-century modern history. And because now it is going on 40, 50 years old, and come up with with zoning that builds in our patterns of today, that builds in our priorities of today, and so that's that tipping point. And Tiny Tim is starving, and our architecture profession, our design profession, can lead us into this new next urban future. By understanding our history and what pitfalls are out there, such as AI, and how we build for what the social and cultural value will always equate. Building towards social and cultural value will always equate to economic value. And right now we're kind of building for economic value because we're financially lost, and that doesn't equal social and cultural value, rarely. It usually just makes a data center out in Imperial County. So we have that opportunity right now at this rocky table of whatever I called it earlier. Plateau. It takes a village. Thank you all.
Mike Cintron is a recent architectural graduate, been in the profession a couple of years now, and has been very involved in community activities, community things about the development of our city since he graduated. And I'd like to get his perspective on where we're going, what Howard said.
No, and you have colleagues out in the audience. I think the history that you intended to have new school students come and be a part of the design profession. We have new school students all within the audience right now who attended these. Yeah, Zach, there we go. So thank you all very, very much. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, it's always hard to follow up after Howard. No, but I really liked what you said about us being at a plateau. And I think in the future, and thinking about just my short time here in San Diego, I've only been here about 7 years, but I really started getting involved early on in 2018 when I moved here and with the Urban Design Committee, and I started hearing a lot about the predictions of where we were going, and so I've been following along for the past 7 years with where people thought we would be or where we were projecting, and I've noticed that that's not really what's been happening. The city's been changing. Back in 2015, we were projecting another 1 million people by 2025, and that rate of increase has just not happened like we expected, and we can blame it a little bit on COVID, but there's so many other factors. I think our housing, where we are with our housing and unaffordability right now is just really changing what we expected to be. And so I think we're taking a lot of short-term quick, trying to go for a lot of short-term quick responses and actions to fight the supply issue that we've been fighting for. Everyone's saying that, oh, we just need to build more, build more, build more. And then once we get that supply, then we'll, have our demand satisfied and housing costs will go down. But we're just not seeing that. We're trying to implement these short-term solutions that aren't really doing the job, and they're just exacerbating the problem. So then now we're seeing our population's been decreasing from what we expected it since I moved here. And so I think that's one of the major issues that we're dealing with, is just we're doing a lot of it's a lot of ideas and thoughts about how do we build more, but it's not necessarily focused enough on who we're building for and the different price ranges, I think, of affordability that we need in our community to actually be successful. And I think because of that, we're driving a lot of people away. I have plenty of friends my age that are looking at moving to Arizona, Texas, or elsewhere, just because we can't think about a future in San Diego, because how are we supposed to do that when we can't buy into the industry and into the market? And I think part of that too is just looking into the new models and changing of how we're delivering our architecture and who we're thinking of. I think a lot of people, technology keeps coming up, AI, and how that's changing what we're doing and how we're practicing architecture. I think alongside that, one of the things that I think is very important that I'm not seeing from my involvement with the industry and the various firms that I've worked with in San Diego and elsewhere is that we're thinking about AI as only technology. But then I was thinking, the Americans with Disabilities Act passed in 1990. That was 35 years ago. So in the past 40 years, there's been changes in how we're designing and who we're designing for, and more of an inclusive nature in the architecture that we're creating and who we're thinking about. And if we keep designing and keep thinking about our city the way that we did 40 years ago, we're not going to make it another 40 years, because we're all going to get sued for not thinking about the right people. And just I think those are some of my big points here on the state of where we're going and how we need to be thinking more about different communities that we're designing for, and inclusivity and who we're designing for, and then also just being more cognizant of the type of architecture that we're building so that we can find more affordability.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's true. Megan Groth is going to be next. Megan is an architect, an academic. She teaches right now at USD. She's taught at Woodbury. But also, and perhaps more importantly, she's a strong advocate for returning design to the process of development and planning, something we've lost over the years in terms of the quality of the built environment that we've been asking for, or we should have, with all this new development Mike mentioned. So,
Thanks, Mike, and thanks for having me. I will just say, just because Mike ended kind of on that note about how many people have left. So I taught at Woodbury for 5 in the San Diego campus, and also the Burbank campus for 5 years. And I asked, I always talk to my students at the end. We always have kind of an open forum. I taught professional practice. We always talked about the profession and the future of the profession. And I always had kind of an open forum at the end, ask me anything. And then also ask them, what are you thinking about your future? You've spent 5 years, you have a professional license now, or a professional degree, you're in it. You've paid all this money for this degree, what are you gonna do next? And the last class at Woodbury, nobody was staying in San Diego. They did not see a future for themselves in San Diego as architects. And that had to do with both the cost of living, but also the quality of the professional culture and environment. They did not see that there was a place for them. And so that was extremely disheartening, and that was, 2 years ago. So now I'm having those conversations with the students at USD, which is a liberal arts college. It's a bit of a different situation, but but it is kind of a lot of the same discussions that we're having. So I am going to talk about architecture, not urbanism. I come from an urbanism background as well, but I think if Frank Wolden was here, he'd be thrilled that we're going to talk about architecture. And of course, Friends of San Diego Architecture. So kind of a two-pronged thought. One is that yesterday, my colleague Heather Russick and I, with the AIA San Diego, who by the way has a new executive director, which is very exciting and is kind of taking this big step forward into the future. So please get involved. It's just really, really promising about where we're going, and we're having the national convention for the AIA downtown San Diego in June. So keep an eye out. It's just really exciting for us, I think, and they've got a really great board that's being developed. But Heather and I put together a listening session with the heads of the departments who very graciously, of the city, who graciously gave their time yesterday, and also different representatives from different council offices. Thank you, Abby. And so we had a listening session about the profession hearing from the public sector of what can we do to support you. Architects are inherently pro-public service. We do this not only for a passion for the work, but because we believe in a better future. We believe in the built environment for everyone. And oftentimes, our contractual relationships is just with our clients. It's not about the rest of everyone that actually engages with the architecture. And so we're very concerned about supporting the public sector. And we heard a lot. And we'll be digesting kind of what we heard. But, as a few footnotes, is one, the ministerial review of how to get projects passed in the city that has been going on for about 10 years now, has fundamentally changed the way that we design and build architecture in this city. And so hearing from, the head of DSD and the head of planning and the head of, capital projects and all these people, there is a mistrust from the public, which we've also talked about, just a general kind of concern where the city is not representing the community's, in best interest, but also that through this ministerial process, there is not a forum for the public to give feedback about design and development that is happening in the community. The community planning groups are not that place anymore because with ministerial processes, there is no community planning hearing and that sort of thing. So we heard a lot of just the frustration from the public sector. I mean, Mike mentioned as well how underfunded people are. It's stressful from both ends. So it's stressful from the community perspective, not understanding it and feeling like they're not being heard. It's stressful from the public sector perspective of being stressful that people don't understand how this works, and this is where we are right now. We have been for the last 10 years. So I think, as an AIA, we're trying to understand how we can better both engage in public education, but also, how can we help the city and how can we make this so that we don't have these situations and we can all improve the quality of the built environment together. It's not out of a lack of desire, and that's definitely something that we've heard from all people. And I think the Friends of San Diego Architecture, obviously, this organization was made to educate the public and to better understand how buildings are built and why they're built the way they are. So I think, for us, we're in this moment of, okay, we are all at the table and how can we collaboratively work on that? So I think it's very exciting, but it's very daunting, the future, and how we kind of work together moving forward. I will also just say about the, public funding as well, right? And also about the future, right? Our students don't see a future here. And actually we are down to only one professional school of architecture. So we lost Woodbury. We have only New School right now, which of course we know is a for-profit university as well. The community colleges are stepping up and starting to have programs. But once again, those students, talking to them and so background that Mike did give, I am part of a collaborative project called the Trans-Border Association of Architectural Education, which is an organization of 14 schools of architecture in San Diego, Tijuana. We've now added schools in Juarez and Mexicali and Texas Tech. So we're kind of expanding along the border, but the point of the project is it's faculty and students working together to better understand our region and to research our region, and also to work together in providing opportunities for students, basically. And from that experience, talking with students about, what opportunities are there in Tijuana, what opportunities are there in San Diego or not, I think education is going through a massive change right now, and especially in architecture education, not just locally, but everywhere. And, we really do need to look at ourselves and see what opportunities are we providing for the next generation. Not only just to hire them, just to keep them in San Diego, but to give them opportunities to do public work. When you look at the great cities and countries that have produced some of the international architects of the world, the Netherlands put a lot of money into architects. That's why Rem Koolhaas is who Rem Koolhaas is, because it was state-sponsored, a lot of his work. Bjarke Ingels is who Bjarke Ingels is because the Danish government put a lot of money into public architecture, and he, as a young student, was able to get into that. Same goes for the UK, which is now kind of in its twilight experience right now. But what can we do to support the next generation so that we have people ready to take on these challenges? Because that's really important. All right, thanks.
Thank you. To wrap up for at least the first set of comments is Gary London. Gary and I go back almost as much, or perhaps as much as that representative architecture. He's a development, financial, economist, advisor. I don't know. And he's been doing that for ever and ever. And has been working with the development community all that time, and I would like your perspective on where we're going, where we are, where we should be.
If you get it. When I stand,
Yeah.
it's only because I'm short. By the way, I very seldom get to speak to an audience where I'm almost the youngest in the room, so. Present. Not out. So I think I want to speak to the economy. I want to speak to demographics, and I want to talk about technology and the impact of it on the next 40 years. I will say that with all due respect to Shakespeare, past is not prologue. We have a very different future. We're probably at a point in our urban region where kind of an inflection point where I think we're going to change pretty dramatically over the coming years, because we've grown up. You reminded me when I walked through the door that I've been here since 1974. I came here to go to grad school and stayed. And what hasn't changed is the weather is the same. The community sort of ethos is very similar. It's a conservative, even though we're all Democrats on the city council now, we're still a relatively conservative community in terms of our population, and we are, because we're an aging community as well. I'll get to that in a minute. But if you look around San Diego from 30,000 feet down, it hasn't changed that much. So I think there's a tendency to think that the next 40 years are going to be radically different, and they may. But the last 40 years ago doesn't look to me a lot different than San Diego today. There have obviously been changes, but I think we're going to see more going forward. One big change is the air is a lot cleaner than it was when I first moved here. So we got that going for us. So my biggest concern with San Diego right now is something that you touched on, which is that we are stabilizing as a population in the region. We're double the population that we were when I first moved here, but we're pretty much at that level. We may be going down. And the reason for that is that young people that either are raising families or want to raise families can't afford the cost of living in our community. And this is a story that goes all up and down the coast, but it's pretty profound here, to the point where over the past half dozen years, we've seen a net exit, or an exodus of domestic migration. And the only reason our population is stable is because we still have some natural increase. We've had historically more international immigration, which for reasons that are profound and evident to all of us is probably ending. So we're probably going to see a negative situation, which is in direct contrast to the 1980s and 90s and most of the last century. We had one year, Mike, I remember, when we added 90,000 population. We averaged 40 to 50,000 people in growth every year from the 1970s through the 90s. And now that story is over. And if you just want, and it's not just people leaving, it's people that are commuting. There's 47,000 people that commute daily from southern Riverside County to San Diego, congesting the I-15 in a very stressful and unhelpful way. And those are people that who have elected, these are heads of households who have elected to raise their families in southern Riverside, which is substantially less expensive in terms of housing than San Diego, but they're employed in San Diego, and they go through that stress every day. And that's a huge problem that our cities in our region, in our state, frankly, are neglecting and ought to be addressed. And one of the big problems we have in the region right now is that our county, which controls the unincorporated areas, has simply elected not to participate in the housing delivery system for all kinds of reasons, some political and some just not being aware. And this is something we're working on. In direct contrast, and I would say this whether Joe was here or not, our city council and mayor is the most housing-friendly city council we've had in decades. The problem is that you can't address the deficiency which Howard touched on. Deficiency, in my opinion, in terms of supply and demand, is over 100,000 housing units right now. You can't cure that problem through infill. We're making efforts. One of the big platforms that I've been working on is, and I visited with every city councilman and the mayor's office on this, is to do one little simple thing, which is to eliminate the minimum lot size in San Diego, which has been zoned in since 1923 in San Diego, over 100 years in San Diego. And it's time that ends, because one way to cure this exodus of families is to build today's urban version of single-family housing by way of townhomes and row homes, and slowly evolve the elimination of, not the elimination, but the decrease in emphasis of single-family homes. And so while we just saw a new plan come out, for instance, for Claremont, where they want to add 17,000 housing units, a lot of those housing units, and the plan was not wrong, are vertical urban projects. The problem is that they're ignoring the neighborhoods which were developed in the 1950s by Claire Bergner to accommodate families with children returning from World War II. And what we have the opportunity to do with the generation and to create a resurgence of young people to stay in this community is the opportunity to go into the Claremonts, take away the minimum lot size, take away single-family homes gradually as they sell, let developers buy them, and build 5 homes where 1 home existed, and maybe 15 homes where 3 homes existed. So that's a big deal. And I think the council and the mayor are going to pass this over the next year or two, and the city planning department is going to encourage this. But this is hugely important. It's way more important than ADUs and so forth. So it's so important because from an economic perspective, we have to have a growing population. We took a survey in a study that we did some years ago for the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce. And we hired a survey research firm to talk to CEOs and owners of companies. And we asked them the survey research version of, so what keeps you up at night? And the answer, 100% by every one of them, was our inability to retain our employees or to hire new employees. And that's not a dotted line, ladies and gentlemen. That's not a dashed line. That's a straight line between the economy and housing. It's not a housing crisis, it's a prospective economic crisis. If we can't keep those people in this community and grow the young people in this community, then we become boutique economy, kind of like a much bigger version of Santa Barbara, for instance. And if you want to know how to control growth and how to destroy an economy, just go to Detroit and take a look, or go to Cleveland. These are places that have failed, and there's some resurgence in these communities, but it never had to be that way. We don't want to go there in terms of San Diego. So we have some economic issues. Now, the upside of our economy is that we're technologically based, we're diversified economically, we still are substantially less expensive than Bay Area and Silicon Valley, LA and Orange County, as we always have been, and that's the upside. But that story could end as well. So I think these are big challenges economically for us. In terms, so I speak to demographics, I've spoken to economics, maybe more Q&A. And as far as technology, I think that two things can be true at the same time. I think we can become more urban, more vertical, more creative in terms of our city, and we will, and in terms of our architecture over the coming years. But at the same time, these major events in technology are going to profoundly change where we live and how we work. I'm an example. I work in my ADU in Point Loma. I built the house behind my house some years ago to accommodate my growing family. I'm also the world's oldest father here. I left 3 teenagers over at Liberty Station to come here this morning. And my office is in Carlsbad. There was a time up until about a month ago where I hadn't been in my own office for a year because we do video conferencing, and I don't want to commute. I just don't want to deal with it. And as we start to see a world where autonomous automobiles are going to take over, and they will. I'm usually right about the future. I'm wrong about the timing. I'm always wrong about that. So I thought autonomous automobiles were going to be a thing at this point. And I have a Tesla, and I'm scared to let it go by itself. You know, I mean, I'm going to run into a train or something. But that day is coming. And when that day comes, not only are we going to see a much more sort of urban solution to a future of San Diego, as we've been speaking of, but we're going to see a much more suburban solution. In other words, that commute isn't going to end unless we have a lot more housing on the I-15 corridor to get the county involved in allowing some smart development along the corridors, the I-15, 125, the 8, and so forth. We're going to see more and more people commute from further and further distances because while they're moving, they can treat their autonomous automobile like we treat a ride in a train today. If you're in a train, and I did this. I commuted from in an old job. I commuted from San Diego to LA a couple times a week. And when I as I was going from Del Mar to downtown LA, I worked. I was on my computer, on my phone, and so forth. On the way back, I usually got drunk. But if you're in an auto, you can basically that's autonomous. You can be on a train without tracks. And so we're going to see a lot more pressure to build in suburban areas because people don't have that linkage between where they work and where they live anymore. And that's going to become more profound in the coming years with technology. So I think that these are some of the challenges. I will say, and I'll end this way, I will say the positive thing about San Diego going forward is that we're in the climate change Goldilocks zone. Yeah. If you look at San Diego downtown right now, half of the condominium units are owned by people whose primary address is somewhere else. Yeah. If you look at La Jolla, I hang out in La Jolla a lot, not as much as Joe does, but I hang out there because I like it. Many homes are dark. They're dark because wealthy people from around the world have moved there as a way of potentially preserving a lifestyle that's going away elsewhere in the world as it gets hotter, as more severe weather gets in place, as water rises. All those things are going to have a less profound impact in San Diego and Southern California than they are everywhere else. So we're going to continue to get that population and get that investment in this region. And hopefully with that comes a realization that we have to do a better job in terms of accommodating people, and frankly do a better job in architecture. I've always viewed San Diego as an architectural wasteland, principally because our weather is so good. Developers, my clients, don't have to ask their architects to build. I think it's as simple as this. They don't have to ask their architects to build good architecture because they're going to fill those buildings with people in offices and retail going forward with bad architecture and not spend a lot of money on it because the weather's so good. That's what attracts people here. So that's a big challenge. When you walk on the High Line in New York City or anywhere else in big cities in America, you see much nicer, interesting, eccentric, game-changing architecture than you do here, and I'd certainly like to see a better future in that regard. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
I want to thank couple of comments before I want to ask you some questions or get you involved in the conversation before we go to the audience. But you mentioned the architecture and what your developers do. Rich Louv, columnist for the Union Tribune, used to call it the stucco wasteland. And that's a lot of what we build, which I want to raise a question about. If suburban development does occur, are we exacerbating problems, even though we're providing roast over people's heads? Not yet. And you know, what is the suburban solution? If we really want to, we talk about building neighborhoods as well. One of my problems with what the city's doing, we're building a lot of housing, but we're not building neighborhoods. We're just building boxes, and maybe not the right kind of boxes. So how do we change some of that so that we do start to build neighborhoods? I also say that I disagree. I agree with Shakespeare, the past is prologue. All the issues we're talking about today, we've been talking about for the 40 years that Friends has been around, or many years that I've been around.
Right.
They just never go away. We just have to constantly work at it. Like you're building a personal relationship, you've got to work at these things in order to make sure you're doing something good or not so good. So I want to just ask the panel to react to each other. Are we building the right kind of things? And what can we do to really refocus? I mentioned, you know, we built things, and I mentioned earlier the wall we built between the waterfront and downtown with the convention center and the hotel. We have visions. We forget about the visions. We do things. Can we really sort of correct that? Megan talked a lot about community and people's what came out of her session yesterday. Neighbors, communities don't feel that anybody's listening to them, or they have a voice in what happens to their neighborhood. How do we begin to address some of that? Howard is championing it.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for asking me the question. How? It's the rules. As Gary was saying and Megan was saying, the architecture is directly related to what's by right rules, which are embedded in the zoning ordinance from the 50s and the 60s. And the thing that's not happening is row houses and townhouses don't happen naturally in San Diego because our rules really create Huffman 6-packs that have now become 32-packs. It's the same. The frontages are still terrible because we don't value the street. We don't value the community is about streets and parks. That's the public spaces where we all come together with our private buildings and private buildings fronting onto streets. And therefore, when you go to a Paris or in New Orleans or an older place that fronts onto the street and shaped streets, you go, oh, this is great character. You come to San Diego and you see the shoulders of buildings with all of the public frontages going all the way to the alley. And so it's a matter of our rules. And our rules are bad, and we're just waiving rules to get affordable housing, but we're not waiving enough of the rules are too inherent, such as the minimum lot size and things of that nature, to turn towards the street and create that value. And then I just want to say lastly, because I don't need to speak again. The issue that changed that Gary described from the history is that the feds used to subsidize the people coming back from the war. The GI Bill helped us. We had federal housing lending to help subsidize what we paid in taxes and what we paid in insurance for Prop 13. And what we paid in California for homes was very, very cheap and subsidized. And then when we went to universities, my era is probably the last era of getting the GI Bill people, that all that federal money was supporting universities, and I had a very wonderful cheap education that today is all done by credit debt. And that's changed the most, and that's why I think universities need reform and housing needs reform, is because the feds are out of the game.
Yeah, I think so. A couple comments on that. Are we building right? Mike asked, and I think the answer is no. Like Howard said, we need to be building the more diverse housing supply. And then how, with the rules that you mentioned, I think one of the issues that we're seeing, or that I'm noticing, is that a lot of the developers are just not even paying attention to the rules. They're just paying away the fees to not do the things that we're putting into regulation, such as like complete communities. Everyone just pays a development fee to not do the public space that they're supposed to be doing, or they pay someone else to build their affordable housing 20 years from now or whenever they're going to do it, but they're not including it and doing it themselves. And then I think one of the things that we can do, I read an article recently in the New York Times and there was a comment that I really enjoyed, is that if we just looked at making a little bit less, so much of what I've seen in the industry and the development is when we've got all these people talking about how they've got to hit their bottom line and pencil out. It's like, well, you got to adjust what you're penciling for. And, if you just made a little bit less, you could maybe have a small.
You're talking about developer profits?
Yes.
I can assure you they're making less.
Okay. And then I think also hitting on how do we do better, I think it's us as a community, the people that are talking in this room, the people that we reach and talk to, all of us just doing a better job of advocating. And I think we're doing a little bit of that now, but we could all just keep doing a little bit more.
What was the question, Mike? Oh, I know. More neighborhoods make more livable zones. Well, listen, we actually have a recent tradition of doing some of that. My firm has been working on, for a number of years now, reinventing shopping centers into residentially dominated mixed-use projects. We just finished working on Mission Valley Center, where we had over 600 residential units there. It's not going to come out exactly how I wanted it to, but economics comes into play, and lack of courage and all this stuff. But it should be pretty neat. I didn't work on fashion, but we're adding 800 units there apparently over time. There's a remake of Horton Plaza. By the way, one of my predictions 40 years from now is the city council and mayor will still be at 202 C Street. Right. It should be. By the way, if you really want to make an impact in this community, pressure your city council and mayor to seriously consider moving everything over to Horton Plaza. It's a once in a generation opportunity to take 700,000 feet of office space and move the entire city offices over there and get rid of that rat hole, which was a rat hole when Mike and I worked, when I worked for Mike back there in 76 or 77. It's a travesty that the city didn't bid for that property, and the mayor is not behind it. And as much as I respect our mayor in terms of a lot of other things, he's not showing the courage just to move over there. I think there's just too much stuck in the budget crisis right now to understand the opportunity. And by the way, the idea of densifying through taking away minimum lot size, we did a study on that as part of our lobbying effort, and we think we can raise over $300 million in property taxes to the city to solve all their budget dilemmas if they just do that one little thing instead of raising parking fees here at Balboa Park. So I think that's something that we have to focus on. But I also will tell you that we're working on 3 projects right now that are old aggregate mining sites within or near the city of San Diego, where we are trying to do master planning of the sort that you're talking about, where we build neighborhoods. I cut my teeth by doing the feasibility studies in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s. I think of every project beginning with the name Rancho. I think I was responsible for the financial performance and market studies on all of these projects. And I haven't been in the Rancho business for a long time. We've been doing complicated mixed-use urban vertical projects in downtown and other places. But we are doing these big mining sites now where we have an opportunity to recreate master plan communities. So there is hope there. And I think when you look at, I don't mean to pick out Claremont, but Claremont was built back in the 50s and 60s to be cheap and ugly. And today it's cheap, ugly, and old. And,
Wait a minute.
the problem is when I make that comment, there's always someone in the audience who I dissed. And
You live in
I do that just to provoke. That's it.
Yeah, I know.
Because I can pick on Sarah Mays, I can pick on so I guess the point is that there is hope. We are doing some of these things that you're advocating, Michael, but it's not happening as quick or as intelligently as I'd like to see it either.
So just a comment on the rat hole, is that, that is also a product of not investing in maintaining buildings that we have and spaces that we have. And I think that's something that as we move forward, there's great talk in other countries more than our country about a moratorium on building. And this has to do with carbon, this has to do with how much we have to contribute. And the idea of, instead of having to make a case for keeping a building, in certain, Finland and other, Nordic countries, which of course, there's various economic reasons why they can do this and we can't. But, you've got to make a case for why you can tear down a building. That tearing down a building is not the first course of action. And that is something that has been talked about in architecture circles and is increasingly talked about in architecture circles. So back to the rat hole, that has not been maintained. That has not been renovated since it was built.
Right.
It is designed, we have approached that building and those series of buildings as, dispensable, basically, that we will tear them down. And actually, having talked to someone who is involved in maintaining those buildings, you have to get the mayor to agree to do certain things to maintain it, just to
But
keep
you
it
really
running.
want to maintain that building?
You know what? I think we need to have a serious conversation about it. And I think the problem is that we are of a mind of the first step is get rid of it. Then step two, what are we going to do in it? And I do think as we move forward, we've got to look at how much concrete we are destroying and how much, what is dispensable and what isn't. And I think this goes back to historic preservation and the comment, just kind of the discussion about it. It's not necessarily about the building in particular, but there is a reason why it needs to be probably destroyed at this point. And that
I
has to
think
do
you're raising an important point about all this. All of
money.
it. You don't start from, I'm going to tear it down or I'm going to rehab it. You start looking at what you can do. The building has never been maintained. When I was there, when you were there even, we had rolls of duct tape, which we kept in the
60 years of
office
duct tape.
because that's how we did everything. But it can be looked at, it must be looked at first, even though I think moving City Hall to Horton Plaza is a good idea.
Well, let me just say this real quick. So, you're right, the reason why it sucks is because it's not beloved. It was built for economic purposes. C. Arnold Smith built it there behind the Marquee Hotel on Broadway, which was the big deal to help fill that hotel in his development. Horton Plaza was built for economic development, and it's getting an onion at the next Orchids and Onions Award because of its, right now it's derelict. But these are just economic models that like a strip mall, a shopping center, that now need to be changed and need to be rethought about. So I think your point's very, very good.
Well, Ernie Hahn said when they opened Horton Plaza, in 10 or 20 years, it's going to be changed completely. And he just expected it. Huh? Well, anyway, let me see if there's any comments from the audience.
I'll bring a microphone, I'll bring it to you. Here you go. Hello?
Thank you. I'm going to take my presidential privilege. I live in Claremont. I've been in Claremont since 1975, and I like it because we're having our 75th birthday. October 18th, it's going to be at the first, I think, one of the very first shopping malls at the Claremont Square.
Yeah.
On Saturday, October 18th, so stop by. Everything is there. It's our San Diego's first real suburb, kind of.
See, but the point I was making is exactly your point, which is it's in the center of town. It's near transportation. It's near jobs. It's the very kind of place that you want to pay attention to.
Yeah, And we're changing, a lot of the little defunct sort of strip malls are gonna be housing and you can step in and do some of that. We'd love to see it, because we'd rather see that than 12 ADUs behind a single-family
Me too.
house on a canyon with no parking. So anyway, come to our 75th birthday party on October 18th, and Claremont is a good place because everything is there.
Woo! Will you pass it behind you two people when you're done?
So, one word I haven't heard at all today is homelessness. This is the longest time I've gone without hearing that word in a long time, for several hours.
True.
And I think it's really important for us to think about. We talk about losing the young folks who have to leave because they can't afford to live here. We should not forget that we have, as of today, 10,000 people are turning 65 every day for the next 19 years in America. That's like some 30, 40 million people. Half of them don't even have $60,000 in savings. So they're being forced out. So the loss of population here has a lot to do with those prices. And so how are we going to build? I see stuff going up, which from an urban design standpoint, I'm not sure I really like. But I also look at what we did, say, like Italy after the war, or France, where they're building huge buildings because they are in a crisis and they responded to it like a crisis. We're kind of responding to it like another problem we've got here. And I think that there's different standards we use. And while we should be doing better, let's not forget that people are dying on our streets because we haven't built enough housing.
Can I address that?
Behind you two people.
I just want, Mike alluded to that when he talked about SROs earlier, because we've destroyed a lot of the SROs with downtown redevelopment, a huge amount of them, and that was the repository for a lot of that population.
Right.
When I drove here this morning, I went by all the tents that are the south side of the park here. That's not the solution. And I will tell you from a development perspective, SROs have historically garnered more dollar per square foot in revenue because they're small. They don't pay a lot. The revenue per square foot is really high. Developers could build those things again if the city allowed them to do it.
Yeah.
And that's one. It's not the only solution. There's all kinds of social solutions.
It's
That's
illegal
one
in the
thing.
downtown community.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be.
Go ahead.
I have a teacher's voice, so I'm okay with that.
Okay.
So you mentioned townhomes. I'm absolutely an advocate of townhomes. Townhomes have a front yard, townhomes have a backyard. That dream of, the American dream of owning a home. You picture a front yard, you picture a backyard where your kids can play. Is there any chance that here in this area, we could ever bring the mindset around to those folks who moved to Riverside or moved to Imperial because they want a single family home to raise a family? Is there anything we can do here to help folks realize that if they get row houses or townhouses, I'm not saying it has to be like Linda Vista. Post-war Linda Vista was great. But what can we do to change the mindset and let people know that row houses really can be a single family dwelling?
Yeah.
You want to talk about references, then I'm going to talk about alternative.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. Because I'm probably not nearly as creative as you are. But the idea behind the row home was to recognize the fact that in what we all call in economics the factors of production, which are land, labor, materials, and capital. Those are the factors that go into the cost of a house. By far, land is the most important cost component. You go into the coastal markets, land is responsible for like 80% of the value of a house. You can see that up in Palisades that burned down. You know, those lots are flipping because for almost not for 70-80% of the price that they would have flipped for if the house was still on those lands. So land matters. So what we're proposing is, and I owned a row home for many years, happened to be in downtown San Diego East Village. I just sold it. I owned it for over 20 years. It was a 2,000-foot home, no front yard, well, small little front yard, no backyard, just balconies. 2,000-foot, 3-story home on 700 feet of land. So what I'm saying is when you go to the Claremonts and the Serra Mesas and the Linda Vistas and sort of the old suburban ring of San Diego, you already have the infrastructure in place for families. You've got the parks and the schools and all the in the streets and all that stuff. You're not going to create the kind of civic stress that you normally create with vertical high-rise projects, and you're not taking up land by building backyards. And so that's sort of where I'm coming from. That may be a different place, or maybe just small backyard. What we are thinking, what we do want to make sure of is that there's a parking garage with every one of these units.
Just to
So-
clarify, sir, yes, when I say backyard, I'm talking about a small backyard.
Right.
If the row home is, let's say, 18 feet wide, that the backyard then is maybe an 18 by 18
Got it.
yard.
So can I ask, how many people here live in houses that have too many bedrooms that you don't need anymore? No, because I mean, I do think this is another issue, right? Is the fact that as families change and as people grow out and, go to college and all these sorts of things, there is not just in our city, obviously, or our state, but across the country, is that there are family-sized homes in good school districts that are not, if we want to talk utilized for the best perspective, whatever, but they are families that have been there and do not want to move for very good reason, the community is there, et cetera. But it is oversized for who lives there now. And because of the financial implications of that, is that you are not able to sell, even if people are interested in selling and moving into a smaller space elsewhere in a more urban environment that you can walk to and you don't need a car and all these things. The economics of it absolutely do not make sense. And I think for San Diego, as well as others, that is a huge issue. Is that we've got great school districts that families cannot get into because there is not houses available to be in there.
And by the way,
And vice versa.
I've talked to a couple of the electeds on the school board over the last month, and their big crisis is they're losing students for all the reasons that you cited.
They're shut down school and moving out.
Yeah, no, exactly. And as someone who lives in North Park, I was able to buy, for a variety of special family helping financial reasons and having an ADU and everything, but on my street, the only reason why my house was up for sale was because the widow wanted to move to Arizona to be closer to family and could make it happen. Every other house on the street is a legacy house that has been owned by the same family for now 2 or 3 generations onward. So there are homes available of a certain size for families in these desirable areas. They are not available as well.
Just to clarify a question, because I'm not sure exactly what you're saying. Why is it not feasible for them to sell their house and downsize?
So I think the main obstacle is capital gains tax. The minor obstacle is cyclical things like, I can't get the price for my house or those kind of things. The main obstacle is Prop 13, keep my property taxes down. And if the capital gains tax went away, or got very much minimized, you'd see a whole lot more dynamic return.
So, I guess this is on, I'm not sure. So thanks, Mike and the panel. Lots to unpack here. These are just a couple of comments and then a question. Smokestacks and geraniums, that was earlier on. Temporary paradise, it's interesting. I consider we're still in a temporary paradise because people can't stay here. And so they come, they make their money, and then they move out. Or it's a temporary paradise for those that who pointed out there's empty houses, empty apartments and condos downtown and in La Jolla. I came here in 1975. I was 29. The city's population was 750,000. It's now 50 years later. I felt when I got here at that size, it was a city that I could move into and make a difference. And now we're, 1.4 million? The county is 3.2 million. So the question is there a manageable size of a city where individuals who are graduating from architecture school or moving here for the first time can actually fall, you used the word ethos, and I had written it down earlier, to become part of the ethos of the city and to be able to make a difference so that the city's size is such that you don't lose your humanity as we grow to AI, robot cars, etc. Is there an optimum size for a city? Is he gone? City council? When I came here in 75, there was 8 council districts, maybe 6 to 8 for 750,000 people. We're 1.4 and we have 9 council districts. So is there the representation that's needed? It's a bunch of questions and a bunch of comments.
I think the point you're making is that there's not one solution. Changing the zoning is not the solution for peace in the Mideast. We have to work on all of these things to really address the need.
I know the solution for peace in the Middle East.
To Megan's point, I have kids that come back all the time to visit, but I can't afford to sell my house. I bought my house almost 40-some years ago. If I sell it now, I can't afford to go anywhere unless I move to Arizona, and God knows I don't want to do anything like that. So how do we address that? How do we think about some of these things? Gary mentioned the small lot, going to smaller lots. The 50-foot by 100-foot lot was not codified as the official lot size until the early 80s. We really, and if you look at the older neighborhoods in San Diego, 50 by 50 lot size, 25 by 100, full of that. You look at, I live in Mission Hills, multifamily developments on 50 by 100-foot lots, scattered throughout. That was the trend. The thing that Megan also talked about, during World War II, people who had extra bedrooms rented them out to people who were in the defense industry or the military or whatever involved in war work. We encourage that. Is that something that's also a model that's being talked about today? Is can you, as a senior, rent part of your house out to juniors and to help you take care of things? And we have, so we have to really address it. And we're getting late, and I want to ask Bruce Applegard I'll bring in Mike too because you're late on this, but because temporary paradise was something that is more relevant today than I think it was 50 years ago, and it doesn't provide any guidance. I'm going to give you.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. I just want to mention I have copies of the commemorative edition of Temporary Paradise that for purchase to support the Sustainable Paradise Scholarship Fund that we created at San Diego State. And sorry. So just some quick notes about Temporary Paradise. It was 50 years old. It was really the first regional urban design plan. It served as a timeless, transcendent, transformative vision for our transnational region, simultaneously serving as a roadmap to communicate our region's best ideas through a poetic voice and engaging imagery. It also talked about creating a zone of confluence on our border to share our culture, our economies, and our environment. It had several key areas: valleys and canyons, the seacoast, getting about, growth, existing communities, major centers, the Mexican connection, and the environment. For valleys and canyons, it talked about really preserving the canyons, and that led to the multiple species preservation ordinance and other things. For the seacoast, they talked about building to the sea, but not blocking the coast, but not blocking the views. And when they talked about getting about, they talked about they envisioned the light rail line, and talked about traveling light through buses, through bicycling, through walking. And they also talked about agglomerating around transit stations, so building up around transit stations. And this was 20 years before the idea of transit-oriented development really came through, adopted by Peter Calthorpe. I think in a lot of ways it happened because Mike Stepner, who has always been such a champion of temporary paradise, gave Peter Calthorpe all of the material to come up with the idea of transit-oriented development. They talked about containing suburban growth, but I think for political reasons, they talked about not stopping it entirely. And they conducted surveys of Mission Valley, coming with arguing for several things: not cement line the river, to do better pedestrian connections, and also create many more paseos and wonderful buildings. For existing communities, they came up with guidelines from everything from buildings to the street. They talked about how communities should be involved, but they shouldn't drive the process because they weren't really capable of thinking regionally about the environment or equity issues. They also came up with an environmental plan for San Diego, which proposed urban design operations for the city and the organizations like Sandag. And they also talked about having an urban design process in both the city and Sandag. All this also, talking about creating a zone of confluence around the border, has inspired me to write the Declaration of Independence for San Diego Tijuana. And I want to just thank the panel for all your great comments today.
Thanks.
You want to make one?
Yeah, just one real quick point. Gary, it always brings a smile to my face when I see academia and personal experiences kind of merge together and justify one another. Where you're talking about with the cars and how we travel and commute. Alvin Toffler's The Third Wave is basically my Bible, and what you were saying is in line, almost carbon copy.
I knew him personally.
You knew him personally?
I knew him a couple times.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm a very big fan of his, so I really appreciate what you were saying, and it brought a smile to my face. My question actually, Megan, is geared a little bit more towards you, and based on what both you and Mike Cintron were suggesting. My students, unfortunately, also have gone through that same realization that they don't want to stay in San Diego. As soon as they graduated, half my class already left. So what you guys are saying is not so much as a one-time instance, it's a habit that's been forming. You also mentioned that the architecture schools have been dwindling over time. They've been shutting down, and the one private school that we have, I don't know any of the personal numbers or anything, but from my subjective experience of someone who graduated from new school, I've noticed that the number of students have also been going down as well. So even that's been choking out. In an ideal state, when we have the proper funding, where do you see academia going for the next step? So we can plant the proper seeds for the next generation of architects to take San Diego in the right way that we're all in agreement of.
Well, first of all, part of the issue is proper funding and the cost of higher education, and especially, unfortunately, for architecture, your return on investment for that education. That's also like kind of the worst class I have at professional practice was this is how much you're gonna make when you get out, and the look on everyone's faces. And especially since so many of my students were, are first generation students that went through the community college system, and that's a lot of money, and they're not going to make that back. I think we're in a higher education crisis just in general. And that's true UCSD. That's true for all the schools that don't have architecture programs. I think the answer that is emerging locally is the community colleges are getting into the game of the architecture education. Now, that architecture education so far is slated to look very different than other forms of architecture education because of the funding, because of the way that those schools are structured, how education's delivered. I think it's hard to know. As a member of this transborder group, because also education in Tijuana is a whole different can of worms of issues, much cheaper, but too many students in classes to deliver an architecture education that we recognize in the States. So a lot of the work that we do is providing other forms of workshops and education so everyone gets a more balanced kind of regionally based education. I don't know what the answer is. I think alternative models need to be developed. They're being developed elsewhere. It'd be great to have that available here. And that is something that I am personally working toward, but it's tricky. I think ultimately in education though, much like housing and all these other things, we will continue to have the have and the have-nots. People that can afford to live in North Park will have amazing, I walk my kids to school 10 minutes away. I walk to the gym 13 minutes away, so 3 minutes on. I work from home, or if I drive to USD, it's really not that far. I have an amazing quality of life. I run across my neighbors on the street. We all know each other. The Girl Scouts are all at Morley Field right now having a hike that I'm gonna join. So if you can get into that, and just like the education system, I think USD is developing a really great program. It's expensive. And then the alternative will be, we'll have other versions that are just different, and you're driving an hour and a half to get to work, and you're not seeing your kids because you spend 3 hours in traffic, and you're at our community college with a studio of 100 people. You know, we are developing that system has already been developed and will continue to be developed. I just hope that we are able to have new alternatives and new ways of thinking about it that can kind of start to make inroads in that.
Hi, thank you. Just quick comment on the education and architecture students in particular. I'm a licensing advisor for Southern California, so I'm really tied into how people get licensed essentially, and how we create new architects and a new generation of people in this industry. I will say in the past few years, we've made great inroads into adding alternative ways of getting to become a licensed architect. And so I'm very optimistic about the future of that and architectural education and where that's going. I think we're opening up a lot of opportunities for people to join this industry.
Thank you for those comments. I just want to say I'm glad there's 4 architects from the school in this room that are still in town, so that's good. Not everybody is left. I want to thank the panel for the discussion, comments. I think this is great. Something to think about. We're always at a crossroads in San Diego, every city is, and we're always changing, we're evolving, and it's a constant battle. And you really have to work at it on a regular basis. People have to be engaged and to see something happen. So I want to thank the panel. Next month, one of the things that Gary mentioned was Horton Plaza at City Hall. Come here in October, I'm not sure the date, but we'll get a notice out. You'll be able to talk about that because Betsy Brennan from the Downtown Partnership will be here to talk about their concourse work and what that means, and what is the possibility really of Horton Plaza fulfilling that role. And while we can rehab the old City Hall, it has to be changed.
But that parking garage is so nice. Come on.
Yeah.
That's so good. Just keep the parking. Which I is weird to say.
We'll save the parking garage for you.
It's weird to say that, but.
But thank the panel. Thank you all.